The red elevator. So, this is something that a college kid in Seoul told me about. He swore it wasn't a joke, and the way he described it, man, it stuck with me. He lived in one of those old apartment complexes, the kind that went up fast back in the 70s or 80s. Think tall concrete blocks, gray paint peeling, hallways that echo even if you're walking soft. The kind of place that feels like time just stopped moving. Now, here's the weird part. No matter what time of night, if he rode the elevator after midnight, it would almost always stop at a floor that wasn't supposed to exist. The display would flash, 13. Thing is, that building didn't have a 13th floor. It jumped from 12 to 14, like lots of Asian buildings do, because 13 is bad luck. But when the doors slid open, there it was. A hallway lit up in this unnatural red glow. Not like a warm red light bulb, but like the whole place was soaked in bloody neon. No windows, no exit signs, just a corridor stretching both ways, every surface glowing that same eerie shade. At first, he thought it was a glitch, maybe some maintenance area, but he said he asked around, neighbors, even the building manager, and nobody admitted to knowing about it. They all just brushed it off. And yet, everyone in that complex seemed to have that same tight look in their eyes when he mentioned 13. Like they'd heard it before, but weren't about to talk. He didn't want to step out at first. Who would? The way he told it, the hallway didn't feel empty. Not that he saw anyone, but the silence was heavy, like the place itself was holding its breath. He noticed too, every single time the doors opened, the air was warmer, stale, like being close to a space heater in a closed room. One night, his curiosity almost got the better of him. He leaned forward, just enough to let one shoe rest past the threshold, and said it felt like stepping into a different world. The air pressed against him, thicker, harder to breathe. He yanked his foot back right away. The doors closed, and the elevator continued like nothing had happened. But not everyone pulled back. See, people in the building whispered that anyone who did step out fully walked into that red corridor, never made it back. They didn't vanish right there in the moment. That would have been too obvious. Instead, the story goes, by the next day, they'd be gone. No calls, no belongings moved, just absent. The apartment locked up, their mail piling in the box. Sometimes the landlord would quietly re-rent the unit. No explanation. Other times, the door stayed sealed for years, like the family didn't want to touch it. And no cops, no reports, just silence. He remembered one guy in particular, another student, younger, always carrying a guitar case. He'd heard the guy bragging about checking out the 13th floor, like it was some dare. Next morning, his apartment was empty. Like too empty. Not just the person missing, but furniture, clothes, food. Like the place had been staged. But the dude didn't own much, and no moving trucks were seen. The landlord acted like he'd never rented to anyone there at all. The thing that freaked him out most wasn't just that people disappeared. It was what happened in the days after. Sometimes the elevator would open to 13 even when he wasn't alone. And if someone else was standing there with him, their eyes would flicker. Not with surprise, but with something closer to recognition, like they'd seen it before. A few even seemed drawn toward it, like the red glow was pulling them in. He said he learned to avoid making eye contact, because the more you acknowledged it, the harder it was to resist stepping forward. I asked him why he didn't just move out. He said apartments in Seoul are crazy expensive, and students can't just break leases. But also, he wasn't sure it mattered. Once you'd seen the 13th, it didn't stop showing up. He claimed even when he crashed at a friend's place across town, he saw it once. Different building, different elevator, but the same red glow, the doors open to the same hallway, stretching forever. He hit the close button so fast, he bruised his thumb. There was one detail he dropped that still makes me shiver. He said, "If you lean just a little too far forward while standing in the doorway, without even stepping out, you could see shapes down the hall. Not people exactly, but tall shadows shifting against the glow. They never got closer, but they weren't still either." He couldn't describe them better than that. Just figures moving in ways the eye doesn't quite catch, and he swore he heard footsteps echoing, even though nothing touched the ground. The last time I heard from him, he told me the elevator had gotten bolder. It used to only happen late at night, past midnight. Then it started showing up earlier, like 10 p.m., then 9. He said he was afraid to use elevators at all now. Took the stairs everywhere, even up 12 flights, until his legs were shaking. But he admitted, sooner or later, he knew he'd get caught off guard. Maybe with a friend, maybe half asleep coming back from studying. The doors would open, 13 would flash, and maybe that would be the night his curiosity, or whatever was waiting down there, would win. He never said what happened after that. Just stopped answering messages. And every time I'm in an old building now, especially when I ride alone at night, I can't help but glance at the panel, half expecting to see a number that isn't supposed to exist. And if the doors ever slide open to a red-lit hallway, I'm telling you now, I'm not looking twice. I'm hitting close and running stairs until my lungs give out. Because some doors, once you step through, don't let you back. The Forgotten Classroom. So, there's this story from Busan, South Korea, a port city, second biggest in the country. Busy and modern in most parts, but like anywhere, it's got old corners. People don't talk about much. The story takes place at a small elementary school, one that's been around long enough to go through multiple renovations. The new wings are shiny and bright, but off to the side there's the old building, the one they closed off during the last upgrade. That building, people say, should have been torn down, but instead, it just sits there. 3 floors tall, windows clouded with dust, the walls stained from rain, locked doors, rusted handles. Most of the students are told flat out, don't go near the old wing. Of course, if you tell kids not to look, they're going to look, and that's how the rumor started. The story goes like this. On the 3rd floor, down at the far end of the hallway, there's a classroom that doesn't officially exist anymore. You won't find it on the new school map, teachers won't admit it's there, but kids swear. If you walk far enough, past the boarded windows and the do not enter tape, you'll find a door. And if you open it, you won't come back. Now, to make sense of this, you have to picture a Korean school building. Long corridors, classrooms lined side by side, chalkboards instead of whiteboards in the older ones. The floors are that polished gray stone that always looks damp, and in winter the halls are freezing. So, imagine walking down that kind of hallway alone. At night, when the main lights are off, it's just dim bulbs glowing at wide intervals, leaving long stretches of shadow. At the end, that door. Kids tell each other the same thing. If you step through, it feels like a regular classroom at first. Desks lined up, old wooden chairs, a big chalkboard at the front. But then you hear it, the sound of chalk dragging across the board, even though nobody's holding it. Or worse, nails scraping down the surface, high and sharp. Some kids say they've heard laughter too. Not happy laughter, but the thin kind, like kids whispering jokes behind your back. No one admits to staying long enough to see more. There are stories of dares, though. Back in the 90s, a few kids supposedly snuck in after soccer practice. One never came back. The school explained it away. The boy moved with his family, they said, but the kids knew his desk was still full the next day. His pencil case, his books, all left behind. After that, teachers clamped down hard. Anyone caught near the old wing got punished, sometimes worse than for fighting. But what makes it creepier is the way the adults avoid talking. One former janitor, when pressed, muttered that the third floor hides something best left alone. Another parent claimed that back when she was a student there, police had once swarmed the school after a child went missing. No news story ever surfaced, no official explanation, just silence. And silence makes rumors grow. Some kids said they'd seen shadows moving behind the windows of the abandoned classrooms, even though the panes were covered in grime. Others swore that if you pressed your ear against the wall outside that hidden room, you could hear a faint scratching, like chalk being dragged endlessly across slate. At night, it wasn't uncommon for people walking past the schoolyard to hear faint voices, giggles, running footsteps, when everyone knew no child should be there. One student, now grown, told me he had a personal encounter. He and his friends had sneaked into the old wing one summer evening, climbing through a loose window latch. They crept up to the third floor, flashlights barely cutting through the dark. At the far end, they found the rumored door. He said it wasn't locked, just slightly ajar, as if waiting. The moment he touched it, he felt the air shift. The hallway went silent. So silent, it rang in his ears. He pushed the door open, just enough to shine his light inside. The classroom looked normal, though empty. Rows of desks, a dusty chalkboard, broken blinds over the windows. But when his light swept across the chalkboard, he froze. Words were scrawled there, in shaky handwriting, repeating the same phrase over and over. Stay. That's when they heard the laughter. Not from the classroom, but from behind them in the hall. Childlike, echoing, as if dozens of unseen kids were standing just out of sight. He slammed the door shut, and the three of them bolted so fast, they almost tripped down the stairs. He swears that as they ran, he could still hear footsteps following, perfectly in sync, just one step behind. When I asked him why he thought the school kept the building standing, he shrugged. Maybe it was cheaper to block it off than to demolish it. Maybe the teachers knew something. But he admitted this. After that night, he never once saw that end of the hallway again, even from outside. The windows seemed to vanish into the wall, as though the school itself had erased the place. But every few years, whispers return. Kids at the new wing swear they've heard noises drifting from the old one. A couple teachers have admitted, off the record, that they locked the gates earlier on purpose, to keep anyone from wandering too close. The weirdest rumor. Some kids claim that if you draw a classroom layout in your notebook, or rows of desks, a blackboard, a door at the back, you might hear tapping on the paper at night, like something knocking from the inside. And if you leave the notebook open, the drawing changes by morning. New desks appear, new scribbles on the board, and sometimes there's a small stick figure drawn in the corner, smiling. The thing about stories like this is they hang around because they're sticky. They don't fade even when schools are rebuilt or old wings are bulldozed. And people don't want to check too closely, because what if it's true? What if there really is a room that shouldn't exist, hiding behind locked doors? And what if the laughter isn't just a rumor, but kids still trapped inside, waiting for someone new to join them? That's why, if you ever find yourself wandering a Korean school at night, and you hear scratching on a blackboard that no one's touching, don't go looking for the source. Some classrooms were shut for a reason, and some doors are better left closed. 文字数3276. The woman at the Vanity. This story came from a girl who stayed at her grandmother's house out in the countryside. And if you've ever been to a relative's place that hasn't changed in decades, you know the vibe. Quiet, filled with old furniture, family photos yellowing in frames, and that smell of dust mixed with wood polish. Her grandmother's house was exactly that kind of place. The girl, a high school student, was visiting during summer break. She had her own little guest room upstairs, a space that hadn't been redecorated since the 1970s. The wallpaper was peeling in spots, the floorboards creaked whenever you shifted your weight, and in the corner sat a vanity table, one of those old school ones with a tall oval mirror, a little stool, and tiny drawers for makeup. She never thought much of it. During the day, it looked harmless, just a piece of furniture. But at night, that's when things changed. It was around 2 a.m. She'd been scrolling on her phone under the blanket, trying not to wake anyone with the light, when she heard the faintest noise. A soft clinking sound, like glass touching glass. She thought it was just the house settling. But then she noticed something moving in the corner. At the vanity table, in the dim glow of moonlight leaking through the curtains, was a woman. The girl swore she saw her clearly. Long black hair falling straight, shoulders hunched slightly as she leaned close to the mirror. Her hands moved like she was applying makeup. The sound of bottles and brushes shifting lined up with her movements. But the girl froze when she realized. The woman had no face, no eyes, no mouth, not even a nose, just smooth skin reflecting back. And yet, she kept going through the motions, as if putting on lipstick, brushing her cheeks, powdering nothing. The motions were practiced, almost ritual-like. She wasn't looking at herself because there was nothing to look at. She was just repeating the act again and again. The girl wanted to scream, but she couldn't move. It was that nightmare feeling. Oh, your body heavy, breath caught in your throat. She just watched, her heart racing so hard she could hear the blood pounding in her ears. The faceless woman's hand lifted something invisible to her lips, then back down, over and over. The longer she stared, the more wrong it felt. Like the woman wasn't putting on makeup, but remembering it, playing it out like a ghost, stuck in an old routine. After what felt like forever, the figure stopped. The woman set her invisible tools down, tilted her head as though disappointed, and then just faded. Not like she walked away, like she dissolved, her outline melting into the shadows, until there was nothing but the empty vanity again. The girl didn't sleep after that. She stayed under her blanket, sweating, praying for morning. When the sun finally rose, she convinced herself it had been a dream. Maybe she dozed off and imagined the whole thing, but when she got up, curiosity tugged at her. She walked over to the vanity and pulled open the drawers. Inside one of the small compartments was a box. Old wooden, the kind you'd expect to see in an antique shop. The surface was scratched up, the hinges rusty. She opened it carefully, and inside, she found two things: a tube of lipstick, dried and cracked with age, and a clump of human hair tied with a faded ribbon. She dropped it instantly. The box hit the floor with a dull thud, the lipstick rolling out, the hair spilling across the rug. The smell hit her then. A faint, sour odor, like something left too long in a damp basement. When she showed her grandmother, the old woman went pale. She snatched the items up, shoved them back in the box, and told her never to open that vanity again. She wouldn't explain, no matter how many times the girl asked. The only thing she muttered, almost under her breath, was, "That was hers." Whose, though? The girl never got an answer. She tried asking her aunt later, and even she avoided the question, only saying that the vanity belonged to someone who shouldn't be remembered. That phrase chilled her more than anything. Not couldn't, but shouldn't. Over the next few nights, she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone in that room. Sometimes, while brushing her hair before bed, she'd catch movement in the mirror behind her. Not her own reflection. Something just slightly off, like an extra figure sitting where no one sat. Other times, she swore she heard the faint clink of bottles again, even though the vanity drawers were locked shut by her grandmother. On her final night before heading back to the city, she stayed up late, determined not to look at the vanity. But at exactly 2 a.m, the sound returned. Slow, deliberate scraping, as though something was being dragged across a mirror. She didn't look. She couldn't. The next morning, the vanity mirror was covered in streaks, long smudges like fingers had been wiping across it all night. She never went back to stay in that room again. Even now, when she visits her grandmother, she avoids the stairs to the second floor. The vanity, she says, is still there, still waiting in that corner. And every so often, when the house is quiet, she swears she can hear makeup bottles clinking softly from behind the locked door. The bell in the mountain temple. There's a story from the deep mountains of Korea, out in the Gyeongsang region, where the air is thin, the trees grow dense, and the roads twist up into hills that feel like they've been there forever. Tucked in those mountains is a temple. Quiet, modest, nothing like the grand palaces tourists usually visit. This one was built centuries ago, wood darkened from age, roof tiles curved like waves, and the smell of incense lingering even when no candles are burning. The temple has a bell. Not unusual. Buddhist temples across Asia often have them. Huge bronze bells, sometimes taller than a person, carved with images of lotus flowers and clouds. They're not like church bells. They don't swing back and forth. Instead, you strike them with a heavy wooden log suspended by ropes, and the sound isn't a chime. It's a deep vibration that rolls through your chest, something you feel as much as hear. Normally these bells are rung at dawn or dusk, part of prayers and rituals. But in this temple, the bell is different. The locals say it rings on its own, only at night, and always around midnight. Now, the monks at the temple deny it. They'll smile politely, bow, and tell you no one rings it after evening prayers. But the villagers insist otherwise. People who live down the slope say they've heard it for generations. A low, mournful sound drifting through the mountains when the world is still. It doesn't sound celebratory. It doesn't sound like a call to prayer. It sounds like grief stretched out into a single note. The legend tied to it is older than anyone can trace. They say during one of Korea's endless wars, there were many invasions and rebellions over the centuries. A battle spilled into these mountains. Soldiers, exhausted and starving, tried to take the temple as shelter. The monks refused, protecting the sacred grounds. A slaughter followed. Soldiers fell across the stone steps, monks among them. When it was over, blood ran into the soil beneath the bell. And ever since, people say, the dead never left. The explanation the villagers passed down is simple. The souls of those soldiers, restless and unburied, strike the bell at night to ask for prayers. They want remembrance, chants, offerings, anything to free them from being forgotten. One monk, years back, decided to test it. He was young, fresh to the temple, eager to prove himself. He'd heard the stories whispered by older villagers, bringing rice as offerings, and he laughed them off. He thought maybe kids were sneaking in at night, playing tricks, or maybe it was the wind rattling something that made the sound echo. He told the others he would stay in the main hall after evening prayers, just to see for himself. The abbot warned him not to. Some said the warning wasn't angry, but heavy with sorrow, like someone tired of watching the same mistake repeat. The young monk didn't listen. That night, while the others went to their quarters, he sat cross-legged in the hall, facing the great bell in the corner. Candles flickered, shadows swayed along the beams overhead, and outside, the cicadas droned. Midnight came, and so did the sound. The monk sat up straight, heart pounding. The bell was moving. Slowly, the suspended log swung forward. Not with a jerk, but smoothly, as if guided by careful hands. It struck the bronze. A deep tone rolled through the hall, vibrating the wooden floor beneath him. His ears rang, his chest tightened, and still, the log swung back again. He saw no one there. The log struck once more. The bell moaned with that endless note, filling the hall, pushing into the walls, into his body. He pressed his palms together, whispering a chant to steady himself. But the words faltered. Because in the reflection of the bronze, just faintly, he thought he saw faces. Rows and rows of them. Pale, hollow-eyed, mouths open as if screaming. But no sound came out, except the bells. And then he was gone. The next morning, the others found the hall empty. The candles had burned down to stubs. The bell was silent, still. But the young monk never returned. His robes weren't folded neatly in his room. His bedding was untouched, and his sandals remained by the steps. It was as if he'd walked into the sound itself and never walked back out. Since then, no one at the temple has challenged the story. They lock the hall at night. They don't allow visitors past evening. And whenever someone, usually a curious traveler, asks about the bell, the monks only smile the same sad smile and change the subject. Villagers, though, keep telling it. They say if you camp near the temple on a still night, you'll hear it too. Not every night, but when the air is heavy and the crickets pause, the sound drifts down. A single low tone, stretched like a sigh across the mountains. Some travelers describe it as beautiful. Others say it feels like standing at the edge of a graveyard, knowing the ground beneath is restless. And some claim, if you listen too closely, you'll hear more than the bell. You'll hear faint marching in the background, armor clattering, swords dragging along stone. Whatever the truth, the bell still rings. And when it does, everyone in the valley knows better than to climb the mountain until dawn, because the dead are still asking for prayers. The passenger in the taxi. This story comes from Seoul, the capital of South Korea, a city that never really sleeps. Bright neon, 24-hour restaurants, traffic even at 2 a.m. But the deeper into the night you go, the emptier the streets become, until it's just the occasional car sliding past and the dim glow of streetlights stretching down long roads. Taxi drivers in Seoul have their own set of stories. Long shifts, strange riders, people too drunk to remember where they live. But every driver also knows a few stories that aren't so easy to laugh off. One of the most famous goes like this. A middle-aged driver, pulling a late shift, was heading back toward the outskirts of the city when he saw a young woman waving him down. She looked normal enough. Maybe mid-20s, neat hair, pale face under the glow of the street lamp. She got in the back seat, gave him an address out toward the suburbs, and off they went. At first, it was just small talk. She asked how long he'd been driving, if it was tiring working the night shift. He joked back, said the roads were easier at night when traffic was light. She laughed softly, and for a while it felt like any other ride. But the farther they drove, the quieter it got. The streets thinned, the lights grew farther apart. He glanced at her in the rear view once or twice. She was just staring out the window, expression calm, almost too calm. Something about it made him grip the wheel tighter. Finally, they reached the spot she'd asked for. The entrance of an old tunnel cutting through a hillside on the edge of the city. It wasn't a well-lit tunnel, not one of the busy ones. This was narrow, with stains on the walls and moss creeping along the edges. The kind of place that already makes you uneasy. He pulled up, turned slightly in his seat, and asked for the fare. But the back seat was empty. At first he thought maybe she'd slipped out quickly, but the doors hadn't opened. He would have heard it. The seatbelt was still buckled, just lying slack. And what chilled him most, when he reached back to touch the cushion, it was damp. Not like spilled water, but clammy, cold, as if someone had been sitting there soaked to the bone. His breath caught. He stumbled out of the cab, heart hammering, scanning the tunnel entrance. No one was there. Just silence, broken only by the faint dripping of water from somewhere deep inside. When he finally told other drivers what had happened, they nodded. Some even looked unsurprised. One leaned closer and said quietly, "That tunnel? Years ago, a young woman died there. Car crash. Late at night. Just about the age you described. Locals say she still tries to get home." The story spread among drivers, each adding their own details. Some said she always appeared in the same spot. Others claimed she sometimes gave different addresses, but always ended up leading them back to that same tunnel. A few swore they'd smelled something faint in the car afterward, wet earth or old flowers. And always, the same detail. The seat left cold and damp. What makes this story stick isn't just the scare, it's how ordinary it begins. A simple late-night ride, polite conversation, nothing dramatic. Then, in a blink, the line between normal and impossible vanishes. Even now, taxi drivers in Seoul swap versions of this tale over coffee at rest stops. Some laugh it off as urban legend, others insist they know someone it happened to. But if you ask enough of them, you'll notice they all avoid that tunnel on their routes, especially past midnight. And when you're in a foreign city, sitting in the back of a cab, watching the dark road slide by, it's hard not to think about it. Hard not to glance at the seat beside you, or at the rearview mirror, just to make sure the reflection is still your own. Because maybe, just maybe, someone else is still out there, looking for a ride home they'll never quite reach.